Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe now for future content. Today I am joined by a very special guest, a new horror narrator by the name of Spook Trap. I feel like this guy is going to go on and do great things in this community. I will leave a link to his channel in the description box below as well. So after the video is done, be sure to go over to his channel, subscribe, and show him support. Tell him Sinful sent you. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. The snow fell heavier than usual for this early in the winter. The Minnesota winters are absolutely unreal with snow and ice. I just moved here from Seattle, Washington this past fall, so this will be my very first winter in Minneapolis, where I now reside. I moved to the land of 10,000 lakes for a new tech job that I recently was offered. My marriage of 5 years had recently absolved, and this new job was a breath of fresh air and a brand new start that I so desperately needed. I bought an older home that I planned on fixing up starting in the coming spring. My main focus was winterizing my house before the upcoming snowstorm hits. I live in an old neighborhood on the outskirts of Minneapolis, and the homes are all from the early 1980s and are a bit outdated. On to the night that changed my perspective on humanity as I know and understand it. I finally finished unpacking my personal belongings and getting my furniture set up the way I wanted it. The time was around 10:55 p.m., and I was sipping some herbal tea before I went to bed for the night. My living room is situated perfectly, so I can look out of the window by my favorite rocking chair and see my front yard and the street. As I was finishing up a chapter in my book, I noticed movement outside near my front yard. Since it was so late, everyone on my block was already hunkered down and in bed for the night. There was a man dressed head to toe in black. He seemed to have a full North Face type coat and snow pant get-up on. He was walking extremely slowly past my house. One may think at first nothing was wrong with that, to which I say, be patient for what comes next. I decide to kill my lamplight, and I stealthily hide behind my curtains by the large bay window. I wanted to stay out of sight while keeping this mystery person within my eyesight. The man proceeds to continue walking on the sidewalk and stops directly at my mailbox. The man slowly reaches in his pocket and pulls out a large manila envelope. This takes me by complete surprise. What the hell is he doing? He looks right at my house after he delivers the envelope. I move towards my kitchen so I can get a better view of the mystery man. 10 minutes go by and he is still as a statue. I decide, fuck it. Let's see what this man wants. I grab my old wooden baseball bat I keep by the front door and slowly open my door. My heart is pounding, and I listen to the old wooden door slowly creak open. I walk out onto the stoop and seriously, nothing. I see no one. The man has legit vanished. This makes no sense to me. My street is set up so there is only one way in and one way out. And how could anyone cover that much ground in a matter of moments? I slowly and carefully make my way out to my mailbox and pull out the envelope. The envelope had my full name and no return sender. How the hell does this person know my name? I go inside and open up the envelope carefully. There was a small note that said, "Hey Paul, see you soon." This was so bizarre and terrifying. I'm going to phone the police and start a paper trail on this. Wish me luck, and if something else happens, I will try and update you guys immediately. Hey guys, Sinful here. Before Spook Trap's narrations start, I just want to make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to his channel at the end of the video. Enjoy.
The Blue Hole is a 100-meter deep sinkhole on the coast of the Red Sea, 5 miles north of Dahab, Egypt. Its nickname is the Divers' Cemetery. Divers in Dahab say that nearly 200 died in recent years. Many of those who died were attempting to swim under the ark. Many certified scuba divers think that they are capable of just going a little deeper. But they don't know that there are special gas mixtures, buoyancy, equipment, and training required for just another few meters of depth. Imagine this. You take your PADI open water diving course and you learn your dive charts, buy all your own gear, and become familiar with it. Compared to the average person on the street, you're an expert now. You go diving on coral reefs, a few shipwrecks, and even catch a lobster in New England. You go visit a deep spot like this and you're having a great time. You see something just in front of you, this beautiful cave with sunlight streaming through, and you decide to swim just a little closer. You're not going to go inside it. You know better than that. You just want a closer look. If your dive computer starts beeping, you'll head back up. So you swim a little closer, and it's breathtaking. You're enjoying the view and just floating there, taking it all in. You hear a clanging sound. It's your dive master wrapping the butt of his knife on his tank to get someone's attention. You look up to see what he wants, but after staring into the darkness for the last minute, the sunlight streaming down is blinding. You turn away and reach to check your dive computer, but it's a little awkward for some reason, and you twist your shoulder and pull it towards you. It's beeping and the screen is flashing, "Go up." You stare at it for a few seconds, trying to make out the depth and tank level between flashing words. The numbers won't stay still, and it's really annoying. Your brain isn't getting the info you want at a glance, so you let it fall back to your left shoulder, turn towards the light, and head up. The problem is that the Blue Hole is bigger than anything you've ever dove before, and the clear waters provide a visibility that's 10 times what you're used to in the dark waters of St. Lawrence, where you usually dive. What you don't realize is that when you swam a little further to get a closer look, thinking it was just 30 or 40 meters more, you actually swam almost twice that because the vast scale of things messed up your sense of distance. And while you were looking at the archway, you didn't have any nearby reference point in your vision. More depth equals more pressure, and your BCD, the air-filled jacket that used to control your buoyancy, was compressed a little. You were slowly sinking and had no idea. That's when the dive master began banging his tank and you looked up. This only served to blind you for a moment, and distract your sense of motion and position even more. Your dive computer wasn't sticking out on your chest below your shoulder when you reached for it, because your BCD was shrinking. You turned your body sideways while twisting and reached for it. The 10 seconds spent fumbling for it and staring at the screen brought you deeper, and you began to accelerate with your jacket continuing to shrink. The reason that you didn't hear the beeping at first, and that it took so long to make out the depth between the flashing words, was the nitrogen narcosis. You have been getting depth drunk, and the numbers wouldn't stay still because you were still sinking. You swam towards the light, but the current is pulling you sideways. Your brain is hurting, straining for no reason, and the Blue Hole seems like it's getting narrower, and the light rays above you are going at a funny angle. You kick harder just to keep going up, towards the light, despite this damn current that wants to push you into the wall. Your computer is beeping incessantly, and it feels like you're swimming through mud. Fuck this. You grab the fill button on your jacket and squeeze it. You're not supposed to use your jacket to ascend, as you know that it will expand as the pressure drops, and you'll need to carefully bleed off air to avoid shooting up to the surface. But you don't care about that anymore. Shooting up to the surface is exactly what you want right now, and you'll deal with bleeding air off and making depth stops when you're back up with the rest of your group. The sound of air rushing into your BCD fills your ears, but nothing's happening. Something doesn't sound right, like the air isn't filling fast enough. You look down at your jacket, searching for whatever the trouble might be, and then boom, you bump right into the side of a giant sinkhole. What the hell? Why is the current pulling me sideways? Why is there even a current in an empty hole in the middle of the ocean? You keep holding the button. Inflate, goddammit, inflate. Your computer is now making a frantic screeching sound that you've never heard before. You notice that you've been breathing heavily. It's a sign of stress. And the sound of air rushing into your jacket is getting weaker. Every 10 meters of air adds another 1 atmosphere of pressure. Your tank has enough air for you to spend an hour at 10 meters, 2 atmospheres, and refill your BCD more than 100 times. Each additional 20 meters of depth cuts the time in half. This assumes that you're calm, controlling your breathing, and using your muscles slowly with intention. If you panic, begin breathing quickly and moving rapidly. This cuts your time in half. You're certified to 20 meters, and you've gone down briefly to 30 meters on some shipwrecks before. So you were comfortable swimming to 25 meters to look at the Ark. And while you messed around looking for the dive master and then the computer, you sank to 60 meters, a total of 6 atmospheres of pressure. You have only 10 minutes of air left at this depth. When you swam for the surface, you had become disorientated from twisting around. You swam into the arcway thinking it was the surface. That's why the blue hole looked smaller now. There's no current pulling you sideways. You are continuing to sink to the bottom of the arc. When you hit the bottom and start to inflate your BCD, you are now over 90 meters. You will go through a full tank of air in only a couple of minutes at this depth. Panicking like this, you're down to seconds. There's enough to inflate your BCD, but it's going to take over a minute to fill. And it doesn't matter, because that would only pull you to the top of the arc, and you will drown before you get there. Holding the inflate button, you kick as hard as you can for the light. Your muscles are screaming. Your brain is screaming. And it's getting harder and harder to suck each panicked breath out of your regulator. In a final fit of rage and frustration, you scream into your useless reg, darkness squeezing into the corners of your vision. Alright, let me just try to recall this as best I can. It happened a while back, and I try not to think about it more than I have to. For starters, I used to work at a gas station, but the title made that obvious enough, I guess. It wasn't a place in the middle of a city, but it wasn't way out in the middle of the countryside either. It was one of those awkward in-between areas where it's mostly just low-end houses, fast food joints, and gas stations like the one that hired me. The station was on a 2-lane road and wasn't far from the major highway. And we got a lot of people stopping in for gas who were just on their way to the beach for the weekend or just passing through on their way to the cities around us. Typical of any gas station like the one I worked at. But you see, that was during normal hours. Once the sun went down, that's when the fun really started. That was when all the freaks showed up. Late at night, all the shadier customers would show their repulsive faces. Drunks would stumble through the doors and keep going right for the back wall, where we kept all the alcohol. Teenagers would slink in, trying to buy cigarettes. I'd ID all of them, and some of the cards they showed me looked fake. Some didn't. To be honest with you, I didn't really care. If they wanted to wreck their health, it was their business. Potheads would wander in too, and load up on chips and ice cream. Oh god, the ones who would buy ice cream were a funny bunch. More often than not, they'd ask for a spoon with their ice cream, and we only had the crappy plastic kind. I had one idiot stand there for 20 minutes trying to scoop the dessert into his mouth with one of those bendy spoons. One time, a guy shoplifted the store right in front of me, around midnight. Then, he walked outside, called the cops on himself, and just stood in the parking area waiting for them to show up. I had followed him outside, and I asked him what his deal was. He looked at me and said that he just wanted a place to sleep for the night. I hadn't expected that, but I told him that if he wanted to sell the story, then he should keep running. That he did. He walked off the property and down the small road. I heard sirens not long after. But I suppose I should tell you about the big one. The fucker who made me quit my job. I have a tendency to ramble, and like I said, I try not to think too much about this guy. It was another graveyard shift. Another night of my life spent behind a cheap wooden counter. I was pissing my life away, but I was doing it for some money. So it was all good, and it was better off than most of the people who walked through those doors anyway. It was 2:20 a.m. or so. I remember staring back at the clock in boredom, watching the 2 dots of the display tick on and off as it counted the seconds. That was when I heard the bell over the door, and I looked up to gauge the person who had just stepped into my little world. He was only a little over 5 feet tall and looked like he could have easily been 50 years old. His skin was rough and saggy, his arms and legs were dotted all over with tiny white hairs, matched equally by white hair which hung down in long reams from his head. It was scraggly and matted together. You know how hair gets if you don't take a shower for like 2 days. This guy looks like he'd spent 2 weeks without the good graces of any shampoo. He slowly walked his way over to the counter, mechanically, like each step was a deliberate action. Finally, he made it over to me, and he thumped his hands onto the counter for support. His hands were crisscrossed with varicose veins. They looked like cracks in broken glass. Lines of black grit ran underneath the edges of his fingernails. He finally opened his mouth to speak and gave me a good view of his slimy yellow teeth. Fucking disgusting. He asked in a croaky voice where our bathroom was, and I just pointed sternly to the back corner of the room. There was a little hallway which held doors to the storage rooms and one small bathroom. He lumbered off in that general direction. I silently thanked God that weirdo was out of my face. I heard the door click shut. Once again, I was by myself, for the most part. The station was silent for 5 minutes. Then 10. 15. It started to get weird, how long this guy was taking in the bathroom. If this were a normal guy, I wouldn't have questioned it. But the man in there was anything but normal. At the 20-minute mark, I journeyed out from behind my counter and towards the bathroom. I knocked on the door a couple times and asked if the guy needed any help. I heard him mumble from the other side that he was fine, but he didn't sound all that fine to me. I wasn't about to argue with him though, so I just walked back over to the counter and sat down in my chair. Another 10 minutes went by and the guy still hadn't come out of the bathroom. I was getting agitated at this point. Eventually, I started hearing a noise. Another 10 minutes went by and the guy still hadn't come out of the bathroom. I was getting agitated at this point. Eventually, I started hearing a noise. At first, I couldn't really tell what it was, but it didn't take long to figure it out. I was hearing moaning. I started walking back to the bathroom once again. This time, I could tell as I neared the door that something definitely wasn't right. It sounded like the man was in pain, maybe even afraid. Sheepishly, I knocked on the door once again, and for a while, I didn't get a response. But eventually, the man managed to choke out 2 simple words. "Help me." His moaning was getting louder and turning into yelling. I started hearing banging coming from the other side of the bathroom. I could feel it. I could feel it shake the floor just a little. I went for the knob, but of course the man had locked himself into the room and hadn't gone around to actually trying to unlock it. I was panicking a little. I didn't know if this was just a bad case of the runs or something like that, or if it was something more serious. I started to think the latter was true, but there was a rancid stench that was beginning to make its way from that damn bathroom. It could have just been some horrible diarrhea, I thought. I shuddered a bit at that. He had to unlock it if he wanted any help, but he wasn't listening to me. He had started babbling some incoherent nonsense about how he had to keep the door locked because he was only safe in that room. They were coming for him, he said. I kept shouting at him to unlock the door, but he was off a horrible tangent about how they were coming for him and how they had finally figured him out. All the while his slurred speech was punctuated by cries for help. He just kept shouting for help. I was freaked out, and in that moment, I didn't figure out that I had the time to call the cops or anything like that. I'd like to say that I didn't freak out, that I knew what to do, and handle the situation in a respectable way, but I did none of that. I spent the next probably 5 minutes pacing in that little hallway, my hands pressed in my head in desperation while I tried to think of something, anything to do. The man's yelling and flailing had stopped. I noticed, and I was desperate to do something. Finally, I was struck with inspiration. I went into the storage room next to me and grabbed a rolling dolly that we used to move some of the heavier crates around. Then I rushed back into the hallway, and with all the force I could muster, which must have been lots thanks to adrenaline, I bashed the door wide open. The smell that hit me almost made me throw up right then and there. I dropped the rolling dolly and stumbled away from the room, gagging. I almost fell over, but I steadied myself on a wine shelf. I had to take a moment to catch myself. It felt like I was going insane. It really struck me then that I needed outside help. So I did what any sensible person would have done a while back. I called the police. I assumed the worst, and the moment I saw the man, it had looked like he was certainly dead. He was sprawled out on the tile floor, half-heartedly resting against the wall. His back was slumped down, curving in the space between the wall and the floor. His knuckles were very bloody, and pockmarks in the wall, which also licked with blood, made it fairly obvious he'd been punching around. It was obvious enough where the smell was coming from. The bastard was sitting in a putrid film of brown liquid. Yes, he'd shit himself. He wasn't even on the toilet, for Christ's sake. Fucking hell. I was on the line with the police. I did my best to describe the scene to them. As much as I really didn't want to know what happened to the guy in the bathroom, I figured he could still need help. I announced to the operator that I was going back in. I held out hope that he was alive, but feared otherwise. I guess I really went back into that hallway just out of morbid curiosity, more than anything else. I had to pull my shirt up to cover my face with it, to keep the smell from overpowering me. It didn't do much to help. The guy had a yellowish powder all around his nose and mouth, as well as a little froth at the corners of his lips. His eyes were bloodshot and glazed over. I said to the operator that it looked like he'd overdosed on some drug. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go outside for some fresh air. I was groggy, mortified, and depressed. A man had just died next to me, for God's sake. At the most, I was out there in 5 minutes. I could already hear sirens when I stepped into the cool night breeze. Only 5 minutes. But here's the thing. Here's what really messed me up bad. When the police arrived, they asked me to show them where the incident had occurred. An ambulance was there as well. The paramedics were getting their equipment. I led them all to the back, and it still smelled horrible. There were still punch marks on the wall, and there was still some of that drug powder dusted on the floor. But the man who'd been laying there was gone. He was just fucking gone. Like he hadn't even been there. I don't mean he was gone in the sense that he got up and left, There weren't any boot prints, no streaks of liquid on the floor, no handprints on the walls. There was none of that. It was like he just vanished. I can't explain it. I don't want to know what happened that night. And I quit a few days later. I couldn't keep going back there. Not after all that. You know, the things that guy said keep replaying in my head. All the things about how they were coming for him. God help me.
Hey guys and gals, thank you so much for watching this video. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for future content. I will leave a link to my email in the description box below as well. Until we meet again, my friend and I spooks traps say, stay sinful.